The moment my father stood on that stage and called my sister the only child who deserved our family's future, something inside me cracked. For 28 years, they called me the slow one, the disappointment, the mistake. But what they didn't know was that a quiet envelope sitting in my purse held a secret that could destroy everything they believed about me. And when that truth finally came out, my entire family went silent. Before I tell you what happened next, make sure you subscribe, because stories like this remind us that sometimes the people who underestimate you the most are the ones who regret it the hardest. My name is Emily Carter, and I'm 28 years old. For as long as I can remember, my parents had two versions of reality when it came to their daughters. There was my older sister, Victoria, and then there was me. Victoria was the pride of the family, straight A student, debate team captain, the girl who got a full ride to Harvard before she even graduated high school. My parents talked about her like she was some kind of miracle they created. Me? I was the quiet one who took longer to finish tests. The kid who needed extra tutoring. The daughter my dad would sigh about at dinner when he thought I couldn't hear. The girl just thinks slower, he used to say. My mom had a softer way of putting it, but the meaning was the same. Emily's heart is sweet, she'd say. She just didn't get the brains. When you grow up hearing that long enough, something strange happens. You start to believe it. By the time I was in high school, I stopped trying to compete with Victoria. There was no point. Every achievement she made felt like another reminder that I would always be second place in my own family. But here's the part they never understood. Being quiet doesn't mean being stupid. I watched everything. I noticed things people didn't realize they were revealing. And while my sister collected trophies, I learned something far more valuable. How people really work. When Victoria got accepted into Harvard, my parents threw a party, so big it felt like a wedding reception. Neighbors came over. Champagne bottles popped. My dad gave a speech about raising a genius. I stood in the corner holding a plastic cup of soda while everyone congratulated the wrong daughter. Because the truth was, I had also applied to colleges. Quietly. Without telling anyone. But when my acceptance letter came from a solid state university with a partial scholarship, my parents barely reacted. My dad shrugged. Well, at least she got somewhere. That was the moment I stopped looking for their approval. College became the first place where nobody knew me as the slow daughter. Professors didn't see a comparison. They just saw a student who worked hard. And for the first time in my life, I started to feel capable. Still, every holiday I'd go home and the old dynamic would snap right back into place. Victoria the golden child. Emily the afterthought. But the real fracture in our family didn't happen until 2 years ago. That's when my grandfather died. He was the only person in the family who never treated me differently. When I was a kid, he used to sit with me on the porch and ask questions no one else cared to ask. What do you think, Emily? He'd say. Not Victoria. Me. At the funeral, my parents cried. Victoria cried. Everyone talked about how generous and wise he had been. But a week later, the conversation in my parents' living room revealed something that made my stomach turn. My dad leaned back in his chair and said, almost casually, well, everything will eventually go to Victoria anyway. She's the one who can handle it. I felt that familiar sting again. Like I didn't even exist. Then he looked straight at me and added with a small laugh, managing money requires a certain level of intelligence. Everyone chuckled. Everyone except me. Because what none of them knew was that 2 days earlier, I had received a phone call from my grandfather's attorney. And what he told me in that quiet office would soon change everything my family believed about me. I remember the exact words he said. Emily, your grandfather left something specifically for you. And it's going to surprise everyone. At the time, I didn't understand just how explosive that surprise would be. But I was about to find out. And so was the rest of my family. Just not in the way they expected. The lawyer's office smelled like old paper and polished wood. I remember sitting there, nervously twisting the strap of my purse while Mr. Henderson opened a thick folder in front of him. He looked at me carefully before speaking. Emily, your grandfather updated his will 6 months before he passed. That alone surprised me. No one in my family had mentioned any changes. Then he slid a document across the desk. Most of your grandfather's estate was left to you. I honestly thought I misheard him. Wait, what? I asked quietly. He nodded. The investment portfolio, the lake house, and majority ownership of Carter Logistics. My chest tightened. Carter Logistics was the company my grandfather built from nothing. The same company my father had always bragged would one day belong to Victoria. The value of everything combined? Just over $20 million. For a moment I couldn't speak. My mind kept replaying my father's voice at dinner. Managing money requires a certain level of intelligence. Mr. Henderson must have noticed the shock on my face because he added something else. Your grandfather left a note as well. He handed me a sealed envelope. Inside was a short handwritten message. Emily, you listen more than anyone in this family. You see people clearly. That's a rare kind of intelligence. Never let them convince you otherwise. I cried right there in that office. Not because of the money, but because someone had finally believed in me. At first, I didn't tell my parents. I wanted to understand why my grandfather made that decision. But a few weeks later, the moment came when everything finally exploded. It happened during Victoria's Harvard graduation party. My parents rented a huge hall. My dad stood proudly at the front of the room giving another one of his speeches about Victoria's brilliance and bright future. Then he raised his glass and said something that made the room go quiet. Everything our family has built will eventually go to the child who deserves it. He looked straight at Victoria, the one who can carry the Carter legacy. People clapped. My mom smiled proudly, and I sat quietly in the back row, feeling like I was 12 years old again. The slow daughter. The afterthought. Then my father added with a chuckle, Emily's always been sweet, but business requires a faster mind. A few guests laughed politely. That was the moment I stood up. My hands were shaking, but my voice wasn't. Actually, Dad, I said loud enough for the room to hear. Grandpa already decided who gets the company. The entire room turned toward me. Victoria frowned. What are you talking about? I walked slowly to the front of the room and pulled the document from my purse. The will was updated. My father's smile faded. Emily, this isn't the time for jokes. It's not a joke. I handed him the papers. He read the first page, then the second. And suddenly the confident man who had spent my entire life calling me slow looked like someone had pulled the floor out from under him. 20 million, he whispered. Victoria grabbed the document from his hands, her face turning pale as she scanned it. That's impossible. But it wasn't. The lawyer had already finalized everything. Ownership of Carter Logistics. The lake house. The investments. All of it. Silence filled the room. The same relatives who used to nod along when my parents joked about me being slow were now staring at me like they had never seen me before. Finally, my father looked up. But why would he leave it to you? For the first time in my life, I didn't feel small standing in front of him. I just told the truth. Because he believed I was capable. No yelling. No insults. Just silence. And in that silence, something powerful happened. For the first time ever, my family had no words. That night when I drove home, I kept thinking about my grandfather's note. You see people clearly. Maybe that was my real strength all along. Not being the loudest. Not being the fastest, but understanding people. And sometimes the people who underestimate you the most are the ones who end up proving your worth to the entire world. If this story meant something to you, make sure you subscribe to the channel for more powerful real-life stories like this one. You never know which story might remind you that the person everyone doubts today might be the one who changes everything tomorrow.